In our headlines on this Tuesday, December 2nd, here in South Korea, the National Assembly convenes a plenary session this afternoon to vote on the budget bill for next year at the government-proposed total of 728 trillion won. And President Lee Jae-myung reaffirms his resolve to bring to justice all those behind South Korea's short-lived martial law declaration on December 3rd last year by the former administration. Meanwhile, shares of South Korea's largest online retailer Coupang lose substantial ground on Wall Street, following the company's acknowledgement of a major data leak that began in June and was detected in November. We start today at the National Assembly, where lawmakers across the aisle are gathering for a plenary session later this evening to pass next year's budget bill, as the Parliament counts down just hours to its midnight deadline for that bill. We connect now to our political correspondent Moon Hye-ryun for details. Hye-ryun, welcome. So what's the latest at the Parliament?
Good afternoon, Sunny. The plenary session is due to begin in just under 3 hours from now at 8 p.m, and it's widely expected that the budget bill will pass. The ruling Democratic Party and the main opposition People Power Party have been at odds over various aspects of the bill, but following a series of meetings between the floor leaders, they managed to reach an agreement earlier today on Tuesday to process the bill at the session. Although the legal deadline for South Korea's budget bill to be processed at the National Assembly always falls on December 2nd, this is the first time in 5 years that lawmakers will actually manage to do so, as the budget bill has always been a contentious piece of legislation. It was reported that the two rival parties agreed to cut roughly 4.3 trillion Korean won, or around $2.9 billion from various sections within the government's original proposal, and to increase funding only within the scope of that cut, meaning that the overall scale of the budget bill will stay at a record 728 trillion won. They agreed not to reduce budget allocations for key national agenda items of the Lee Jae-myung administration, such as support for issuing local gift certificates and the National Growth Fund, while cutting some funding from AI-related support programs, policy funds, and reserve budget items. Here's what the floor leaders of each party had to say.
What matters now is execution. This budget must improve people's daily lives, and the Democratic Party will take full responsibility. We'll do our best to make today's budget the starting point for tomorrow's change.
Given the importance of livelihood-related budgets, we ask for your understanding that we agree broadly to pass the budget by the deadline.
And that's all I have for now, but I'll be back in a later newscast with more detailed information. So back to you, Sunny.
All right, Hye-ryun, thank you for now. And yes, do keep us posted. Meanwhile, speaking on the eve of the first anniversary of South Korea's brief martial law under the former administration, President Lee Jae-myung reaffirmed his resolve to bring to justice all those involved. Our Yoon Jung-min reports.
Rooting out the remnants of last year's military rule was among the key topics at Tuesday's cabinet meeting, ahead of the first anniversary of the December 3rd martial law declaration by former President Yoon Suk-yeol.
여기서 멈추지 말아야겠습니다. 곳곳에 숨겨진 내란의 어둠을 온전히 밝혀내서 진정으로 정의로운 국민 통합의 문을 활짝 열어야 합니다.
He sent a similar message the previous day, revisiting his will to make sure any remnants related to the short-lived military rule would not go unpunished. As the president reiterated a no-tolerance principle when it comes to investigating the incident, he instructed his justice minister to speed up reintroducing a bill aimed at eliminating the statute of limitations for state violence, which was vetoed by the previous administration. At the same time, he called for leniency for those who turned themselves in or who were forced into it.
이게 적당히 덮어놓는 게 통합은 아니라고 생각이 돼요. 대신에 그렇다고 해서 그걸 극렬하게 과혹하게 하자는 건 또 아니잖아요. 자발적으로 신고하는 경우는 책임을 감면하는 거를 방침을 좀 정하십시오.
President Lee Jae-myung once again noted South Korea's democratic resilience, stressing efforts by the people who stood up against the martial law on the night it was declared.
비상계엄 저지와 헌정 질서 수호에 함께한 국민들에게 표창 등 의미 있는 증서를 수여하고 그날의 국민적 노고와 국민주권 정신을 대대로 기억하기 위한 방안을 마련해 나갈 생각입니다.
On December 3rd, Lee will deliver a special statement and hold a press conference with foreign media outlets. Later in the evening, he will join a march with the people, calling for an end to insurrection. Both liberals and conservatives plan to organize separate rallies on Wednesday. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Up next, we take a look at the impact of the short-lived martial law declaration on the South Korean economy, starting with the initial shock to its eventual recovery. Our correspondent Park Chun-han walks us through these developments, that is, and the tasks ahead.
South Korea is again starting to see signs of an economic recovery after a series of events behind major uncertainties, such as the shift of power due to the failed martial law declaration and the finalization of tariff negotiations. The Bank of Korea has since projected South Korea's growth rate to be 1% this year and 1.8% in 2026. Next year's projected growth rate is higher due to a recovery in domestic demand and resilient exports, particularly semiconductors. The International Monetary Fund has also raised its next year's growth projection for South Korea to 1.8%, following this year's forecast of a 0.9% increase. South Korea's quarter-on-quarter GDP saw a contraction in the first quarter of 2025, but has since started to rebound. Also, over the past year, South Korea's consumer sentiment has kept growing since hitting 88.2 points last December due to Yoon's brief imposition of martial law. The Composite Consumer Sentiment Index, which is considered optimistic when above 100, surpassed the threshold in May and has continued to climb. In November, it reached 112.4, marking the highest level in 8 years.
As uncertainties eased after the end of martial law and expectations of economic recovery began to form, consumer sentiment appears to be rising as well.
South Korea's benchmark Kospi has also seen a sharp rise of over 66% in 2025, especially after the new government took office in June. The index increase reflects the government's strong policy to shift money flows from being heavily focused on the real estate market to the stock market. Along with the finalized tariff negotiations with the U.S. and the strong performance of AI-related and export-focused stocks, the Kospi has recorded the highest increase among major global indices. However, despite the improvements in economic conditions over the past year, there are still some concerns that South Korea needs to address to move forward. Data from the Bank of Korea and the Bank for International Settlements shows that the Korean won, compared to major trading partner currencies, fell to its weakest level in 16 years and 2 months as of late October. Also, the $1 exchange rate is now trading in the level of 1,471 per US dollar, which saw an increase of 6.2% in 6 months and a 32.7% increase over 5 years.
It's been quite some time since U.S. interest rates surpassed those of Korea. And because many Korean companies now have more reasons to invest in the U.S., the profits they earn from exports are not being remitted back home. Along with Korean investors increasing their investments in overseas stocks, these factors have reduced the supply of dollars while increasing demand.
The Lee Jae-myung administration's expansionary fiscal policy has helped boost the country's economy, but at the same time, it has put pressure on the accelerating national debt. For example, the budget for next year, set at 728 trillion won, is 8.1% higher than last year's budget. Also, it is widely expected that the country will see an even higher annual national debt with the issuance of at least 100 trillion won worth of bonds. But experts here say where and how to allocate money is more important than the absolute amount of the budget.
In the end, it all comes down to where the money is spent and how effectively it's used to serve as the catalyst we want. Fiscal policy requires very specific, targeted spending. So if those measures work well, it can be very positive. But if not, concerns over the country's growing debt will only deepen.
In 2025, South Korea navigated domestic and international uncertainties while establishing and implementing a new national agenda. As 2026 approaches, eyes are on whether the Lee administration's fiscal push will deliver sustained growth and bring stability to the volatile foreign exchange market. Park Jun-an, Arirang News.
The fallout of Coupang's extensive data leak is being witnessed on Wall Street as well, with the online retailer's shares tumbling as investors respond to the company's failure to protect the personal information of over 33 million customers. Our Cha Yoon has the latest.
South Korean retail giant Coupang stock price plunged more than 5% on the New York Stock Exchange on Monday local time, following a massive personal information breach. Coupang closed at $26.65 per share on the day, down 5.36% from the previous day's trading. The aftermath of the incident negatively affected investor sentiment on the U.S. stock market, further fueling a sharp decline in share prices. Bloomberg News pointed out that the incident clearly exposes the vulnerabilities of South Korea's cybersecurity, leading to Coupang's inadequate personal information protection system coming under heavy criticism. The incident has reignited debate over Coupang's incorporation's founder and board chairman Kim Bum-seok. Kim holds over 70% of the company's voting rights, yet he has repeatedly avoided attending National Assembly hearings, citing reasons such as being abroad. In November last year, he cashed out a staggering 484.6 billion won after converting his shares and selling them. Despite generating most of its revenue in Korea through a growing base of Korean consumers, Coupang has been criticized for shirking its social responsibilities by citing its status as a U.S. corporation listed on the U.S. stock market. Police in Seoul are stepping up their investigation into the massive data breach at e-commerce giant Coupang, saying they have now secured the internet protocol address used by the suspect and are tracing their movements. Authorities say the breach began in June and ultimately exposed the personal information of nearly 34 million customers. Coupang revealed the scale of the breach on Saturday, identifying a former employee, a Chinese national who has already left South Korea, as a person responsible. An official with the Seoul Metropolitan Police told reporters on Monday that investigators are analyzing server logs submitted by Coupang. They confirmed that the IP address used in the intrusion has been secured and that officers are now working to locate the suspect. Authorities are coordinating with related ministries to prepare for possible follow-up crimes, given the scale of the leaked information. Meanwhile, public frustration is turning into legal action. Some users have already filed suits through local law firms, setting the stage for what could become a prolonged legal and regulatory battle for the e-commerce giant. Cha Yoon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, consumer prices here held steady for the third month in a row in November, gaining 2.4% on year, remaining unchanged from October and hovering above the central bank's 2% target. Our Yoon covers the latest reading.
Exceeding the Bank of Korea's 2% target, South Korea's consumer prices grew 2.4% on year in November. This is according to data released by the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Tuesday, which shows that consumer prices, a key gauge of inflation, have maintained the same pace of increase as the previous month. Looking at the year 2025, inflation remained above 2% from January through April, before slowing to 1.9% in May, but rose back above 2% in both June and July. The rate dropped to 1.7% in August, but rose to over 2% again in September and October. The government says last month's increase was largely due to a sharp rise in prices of agriculture, livestock, and fishery products, which jumped 5.6% on year. Petroleum prices jumped 5.9%, marking the highest rate of increase since February. A ministry official noted that these are goods most sensitive to foreign currency changes. The high exchange rate has visibly driven up costs for imported essentials, such as petroleum products, food, and raw materials. The Korean won has been among the world's weakest performing currencies over the past year. The Lifestyle Price Index, which tracks frequently purchased goods and services, climbed 2.9%. This marks the steepest increase in 1 year and 4 months, specifically since July of last year. Prices of industrial goods increased 2.3%, while electricity, gas, and water rates rose 0.4%. Impact factors include a strong U.S. dollar and currency volatility, but also unfavorable weather conditions, of which the government says it will remain vigilant and will respond swiftly to manage stable prices. Yoon, Arirang News.
And in Washington, D.C., a South Korean delegation and its U.S. counterparts sat down for talks this past Monday aimed at putting into action the agreements detailed in their joint fact sheet, including lower auto tariffs and nuclear-powered submarines. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
South Korean automobiles exported to the United States will now be subject to a 15% tariff, down from the 25% tariff implemented in April. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick announced through social media on Monday that import duties have been reduced to 15% retroactively to November 1st. Lutnick stated the move matches reciprocal tariffs imposed on Japan and the European Union and follows Seoul's recent legislative steps to fulfill investment pledges made to the U.S. A bill for special investment in the U.S. has been proposed at the National Assembly to carry out the $350 billion worth of investment by South Korea agreed during recent trade negotiations. This economic development comes as diplomats from both sides met in Washington to accelerate the implementation of a joint fact sheet that lays out a broad package of trade, investment, and security agreements reached between President Lee Jae-myung and President Donald Trump last month. First Vice Foreign Minister Park Yoon-ju met with U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau on Monday to work on carrying out those agreements.
We confirmed a shared consensus with the U.S. side to implement the joint fact sheet swiftly and actively.
To achieve this, both sides agreed to establish task forces to drive simultaneous progress across key industries.
We agreed to match specific agencies for each issue to ensure the right counterparts are communicating effectively to move things forward.
A key agenda item was the production of nuclear-powered submarines, which the U.S. gave the green light to following the Trump summit in Gyeongju. During the meeting, Vice Minister Park urged his U.S. counterpart to swiftly begin discussions on civil uranium enrichment and spent nuclear fuel reprocessing by South Korea. Deputy Secretary Landau welcomed South Korea's unprecedented investment commitments. Addressing the recent detention of Korean workers in Georgia, officials noted substantive progress in preventing a recurrence, including the opening of a dedicated visa consultation desk for Korean enterprises. Vice Minister Park is scheduled to meet with White House NSC officials later this week to further discuss the implementation of these measures. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And in other news, South Korea's new multi-purpose satellite Arirang 7 has made contact with a ground station after its launch from South America. The Korea Aerospace Administration says the satellite separated from the Vega C rocket, which lifted off at 2:21 a.m. Korea Standard Time from the Guyana Space Center in Kourou. It established first communication after an hour following liftoff with the Troll base station in Antarctica. Officials add that Arirang 7's solar panels were deployed properly and that all systems appear stable. However, 4 additional communications reportedly need to be made before the mission can be declared a success.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. In Europe, Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelenskyy has made it clear that territory is the biggest obstacle to any peace deal with Russia. He said Ukraine will not surrender land in Donbas, even as Russia keeps demanding it. His comments came in Paris on Monday after talks on ending the war with France's President Emmanuel Macron and leaders from the UK, Germany, Poland, and Italy. At the same time in Florida, Ukrainian and U.S. officials completed 2 days of negotiations to rewrite an early peace plan that Kyiv believed was tilted towards Moscow. The White House said it is very optimistic that progress can be made. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will meet President Vladimir Putin in Russia on Tuesday alongside Trump's son-in-law and advisor Jared Kushner to deliver the results of the Florida talks. Zelenskyy said the discussions were constructive, but warned that territory remains the toughest issue to resolve. In Ukraine, a Russian missile strike on the city of Dnipro killed 4 people and wounded 40, according to Ukrainian officials on Monday. The acting regional governor said 11 of the injured are in serious condition and that search and rescue operations have been completed. Emergency services reported damage to office buildings, businesses, and 49 cars. Images posted online showed firefighters and crews evacuating people on stretchers. Dnipro and its surrounding region has faced frequent Russian missile and drone attacks since 2022. Russia has not commented on the strike. In the United States, the White House released a memo on Monday confirming that President Donald Trump underwent MRI scans of his heart and abdomen in October as part of what his doctor called a preventive executive-level physical. Trump's physician Sean Barbabella said the cardiovascular and abdominal imaging was perfectly normal, adding that the scans are meant for men in Trump's age group to detect issues early. The memo was released after Trump told reporters on Sunday that the MRI results were, quote, perfect. The White House said the scans were part of his routine physical at Walter Reed, though doctors note these types of MRIs are not standard in typical medical screenings. Oxford University Press named rage bait as its word of the year on Monday after the term's usage shot up threefold in the last 12 months. It's defined as content engineered to make you angry just long enough to boost clicks. A sign, Oxford says, that people now recognize how easily online emotions get steered. The phrase first appeared in 2002 before evolving into today's go-to label for outrage-driven posts. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
It's just a couple of days into December and a cold wave advisory has already been issued in Seoul. In addition, a cold wave advisory is in place in the central regions and the northern parts of Gyeongsang-buk-do province. The temperature difference from the morning was not so great, with the daytime temperature staying at only 2 degrees in Seoul. As a strong cold spell gradually descends, the minimum temperature in Seoul will drop to -8 degrees Celsius tomorrow morning. With freezing winds, the feels-like temperature will drop even further to -12 degrees Celsius. You should pay special attention to keeping yourself warm. Most areas will start off at below 0 degrees, with Chuncheon at -11 degrees, Daegu and Gyeongju at -4 degrees. Daily highs will rise to 3 degrees in Gwangju and Daegu, 9 degrees in Jeju. There's a possibility of the first snow of the season in Seoul on Thursday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, so do stay with us and thank you for now.